The L15 weekly podcast on YouTube, giving you the latest news, views and opinions from the football world.
So hello and welcome back to another episode of the L15 weekly podcast, but except from it's not your usual episode of the L15 weekly podcast, it is in fact an extra special episode because it is the L15 weekly extra podcast, where basically if I feel there's too much too much to cover in Friday's episode, then I will, go to an extra episode in midweek, and this one, hopefully for you, is Monday. For me, it's Sunday, and hopefully you guys will be excited to see some fantastic new material coming from the L15 Weekly Studios, we'll call it. But obviously, the L15 Weekly podcast is still a thing, we still do a Friday every Friday, but if I feel there's just too much to talk about on a Friday, so I could have gone into detail about every game during midweek and all that jazz, but instead I'm going to do that in this week's episode. We got some fantastic material coming up for you. I've also got a special guest joining me. Tushar Bahl from BVB Buzz is joining me later on in the episode to talk about Wolfsburg versus Borussia Dortmund, which finished 2-0 to Borussia Dortmund, and also the huge tie in midweek, which is between Dortmund and Bayern Munich, one that could potentially decide the Bundesliga title. We'll hear Tushar Bahl's thoughts along with mine later on in the episode. But for now, let's get straight into this extra episode of the L15 Weekly Extra podcast.
The L15 weekly podcast on YouTube, giving you the latest news, views and opinions from the football world. Join me every Friday from 5 p.m. for a brand new episode of the L15 Weekly Podcast.
So, firstly, we must review every single Bundesliga game from the weekend that I'm currently in at the moment. You guys will be on a Monday evening, but we must start Friday evening, Friday the 22nd of May, where there was a huge game at the Olympiastadion between Hertha Berlin and Union Berlin, a game which was poised to be a very different one, with a very mixed bag of head-to-head form, with 2 wins for Union Berlin, 2 draws and a win for Hertha Berlin before this game took place. Hertha Berlin were the ones who prevailed in the Berlin derby, with Ibisevic, Luka Bacchio, Matheus Cunha scoring for the second game in the row, and Dedrick Boyata also scoring to beat their arch rivals. But it was in which Hertha Berlin really dominated. Union Berlin and Hertha Berlin were only separated by a game took place, but that sort of drags Union Berlin into the relegation sort of picture. I mean, Augsburg also in there. Mainz, Frankfurt, definitely sniffing around that sort of area. But Hertha Berlin seemed to be fairly away from, just they could be sucked into that one. But 15 total shots went to Hertha Berlin, 15 chances created, 5 big chances, 383 accurate passes, 83% pass success, 2 offsides, and a very overall successful second half performance from Hertha Berlin. They were dominant, and obviously my man of the match went to Vedad Ibisevic, who played an 8.7 average rating. He also created the most chances in the match with 4. He's played 75 minutes, 1 goal, 1 assist, 1 total shot, 12 accurate passes. I mean, he was just very, very sublime in that game. So, now that's done and dusted. We'll move to Freiburg versus Werder Bremen, which finished 1-0. I mean, I'm going to go into a bit of detail about some of these games, but some of them I think some of them will be lesser relevant clashes, I'll say. But Freiburg, Werder Bremen finished 1-0 to Werder Bremen. A big 3 points in the relegation dogfight. That now puts them 3 points behind Dusseldorf, who are currently playing a game against Cologne, which will hopefully have finished by the time I finish doing this podcast, so I can add that bit in at the end. But Werder Bremen now 3 points with a 1-0 win over Freiburg. Freiburg, that damaged their European playoff place hopes, I suppose. But it was they did the job on Freiburg, I'm afraid, hitting them on the counter, getting that goal from Leonardo Bittencourt after 19 minutes, and just being able to hold on and defend resolutely was the key. I mean, it was just a good goal from Bittencourt, and it was just a good performance from Werder Bremen, who just managed to hang on in that game in the game. I mean, all it took was a goal, and they were able to sit back and defend and soak up a lot of the pressure. So we'll move on to Paderborn and Hoffenheim, another game crucial in the relegation picture, which finished Paderborn 1, Hoffenheim 1, which isn't a game that SC Paderborn will be looking to draw, being bottom of the league, 18 points at the bottom of the league now, only 3 points away from the next team, which is Werder Bremen. Hoffenheim, they're looking up gently in too much confidence, because they're not that close to getting it. They're not that close to getting up there. They're 3 points away, and as I speak, Fortuna Düsseldorf have gone 1-0 up in that game. So that puts them out of the relegation playoff place, I'm fairly sure. But we'll talk more again about that game when it's actually finished. But Hoffenheim, 3 points behind. 3 points behind Wolfsburg in that European qualification place. So it'll be interesting to see if they can get up there. And so Hoffenheim and Paderborn playing in a very good game in which Hoffenheim dominated, but Paderborn held on for a point. To another big clash which happened yesterday, which was between Mönchengladbach and Bayer Leverkusen, a game which was pivotal in the race for Champions League football, with Leverkusen putting Mönchengladbach down. As we said, they could leapfrog them, and they ended up doing so. Kai Havertz was a real star of the match, scoring after only 7 minutes, putting the ball through Jan Sommer's legs, and then Marcus Thuram scored after 52 minutes to equalise for Mönchengladbach. But then Havertz scored a penalty, and Sven Bender scored again in the 81st minute to put this game to bed. It was just a classic performance from Bayer Leverkusen, one that which are starting to become to expect from Peter Bosch, former Borussia Dortmund manager. But they were really good. Kai Havertz is really looking the real deal. Again, man of the match for the second week in the row with a rating of 9.0. He also had the most tackles in the match with 2, hit the woodwork 1 time in 4 shots. He was also the best player in the match. 2 goals, 4 shots, 37 accurate passes, 82% pass success. People are starting to talk about him being the next big thing in football. I can't say that's he is going to be the next thing. I think he's going to be a really good player, but I can't say that's not because people are missing the football and people are not used, are missing players like Mbappe and things like that. But I think Kai Havertz certainly does have a lot of potential. It was a good win for Leverkusen, propelling them towards a Champions League spot, so that's excellent to see from them. Mönchengladbach will be disappointed that they've gone out and lost that game. They were looking poised for Champions League football next season, and they seem to have let themselves down with this performance. The next game we're going on to talk about is Wolfsburg and Borussia Dortmund, which finished 2-0 to Borussia Dortmund. And who better to talk about this game than BVB Buzz's Tushar Bahl. Tushar, how are you?
I'm good, thanks for having me.
It's no problem. So firstly, how do you feel the game against Wolfsburg went today?
I think Dortmund played really well. They weren't always on top, but they made sure that they did not concede like they have in a few of the games this season. They defended really well, and they put in a professional display to keep that clean sheet and ultimately get that second goal.
And Achraf Hakimi and Rafa Guerreiro scored both the goals in today's game. Just how crucial are they to Lucien Favre's system at Borussia Dortmund?
Yeah, they're very crucial. I think the role of the full wing-back has been made even more crucial since the switch to the 3-5-2 formation, and both of them are really, really good going forward, and they are not afraid to make runs and help out the team. They're good at interplay, and so I think their role is really, really crucial in this team. And not only do they score goals, but they link up really well. They help out going forward. So it's great to have them in the team.
And obviously, this game was very much gearing up to the game on Tuesday night against Bayern Munich. You're 2 points behind Bayern. How can you see that game going on Tuesday?
I think it'll be a very tight game. It's at the Signal Iduna Park, so Dortmund will be confident of getting something out of the game. They really need a win to close the gap to Bayern. Otherwise, if Bayern win, it could be curtains for their title challenge. So Dortmund, all the pressure will be on Dortmund to get the win. And I think they have a chance going into the game because they are in good form. They are defending well, but their recent record against Bayern is not that good. So that will be coming into consideration. and it will be a very tight game, and I'm sure everyone will be watching because it could potentially decide the Bundesliga title.
And if you were to beat Bayern Munich on Tuesday, can you see yourself in Borussia Dortmund winning the Bundesliga title this season?
Yeah, definitely. I think Borussia Dortmund, if they beat Bayern Munich, it will not only be a massive boost to their confidence, it will also put them within touching distance of Bayern. And I think Borussia Dortmund have a few easier games in comparison to Bayern Munich. They have to play Leipzig and Hoffenheim in the last 2 match days, but other than that, I think their schedule after Bayern is relatively easy. So if they can beat Bayern, they will fancy their chances of flipping them to the title.
So if you had to make a score prediction for the game against Bayern Munich, what score do you think it's going to be on Tuesday night?
It's a tough one because Bayern are in such good form. They are playing some great football under Hansi Flick, and Borussia Dortmund are in good form as well, but they are missing quite a few key players through injury, so it'll be tough for them. But with that home advantage, even though they won't have fans, they are still unbeaten at home this season. So if that could really help them, and if Haaland and Sancho can find their form, hopefully they can lead Dortmund to victory.
Okay, well, thank you very much for coming on, Tushar. It's been very good having you on again.
Thanks for having me. It's great to talk with you. That's Paul.
So, after looking at Borussia Dortmund Wolfsburg with Tushar, we will move on to their arch rivals Bayern Munich playing against Eintracht Frankfurt, which ended up in a very high-scoring game with Martin Hinteregger of Eintracht Frankfurt being among the goals. Not the goals he'd like to be among, but Leon Goretzka scored after 17 minutes, then Müller scored, then Lewandowski scored, then Hinteregger scored 2 for Eintracht Frankfurt, 2 goals in 52 and 55 minutes, then Alphonso Davies scored, and then Hinteregger, he just had to pop up and help Bayern on their way to victory with a goal in the wrong end. Actually, not really the way he would have wanted to go. Not really the way you would have wanted to go to. But good win in the end for Bayern Munich. They propel themselves up 4 points clear of Borussia Dortmund. But this game on Tuesday is really a huge one, which we just heard Tushar talking about. So that will count as the preview for that game. But it's going to be a very interesting one to see how that one turns out for Bayern Munich. I mean, they're gonna have to bring out the big guns, but I mean, both of them going into this game positively, and both of them going in with full of confidence, which is interesting to see. Oh, now we must move on to Sunday's games and have a look at Schalke and Augsburg, which finished 3-0 to Augsburg. A bit of a shock result in terms of the table, I suppose, with Schalke dominating most of possession, and Augsburg sort of starting to propel themselves away from relegation trouble. I mean, they looked right in the thick of it, and now are looking a bit more sharper in that sort of respect. So, but that's a big dent to Schalke's Europa League qualification place problem. I mean, they're looking at that, thinking maybe it won't be happening just yet. But it'll be interesting to see if Schalke can pull it all together and see if they can leapfrog Wolfsburg. But we must move on now to Mainz and RB Leipzig, a game which didn't in any way go Mainz's way. They were absolutely appalling, absolutely battered by RB Leipzig, losing 5-0 in the end, which isn't what the Mainz manager Adjim Bialoza would have wanted in any way, shape or form. I mean, Leipzig, Werner and Poulsen and Sabitzer, but Mainz right in the thick of that relegation battle now, so it'll be interesting to see if they can get themselves out of it, which I think is pretty debatable at the moment. Dusseldorf playing and winning at the moment, so Mainz may find themselves in a bit of trouble ever so soon. But down in the relegation side of the table. Now moving on to the most latest game, which was between Köln and Fortuna Dusseldorf, which had a dramatic turn of events involving Fortuna Dusseldorf. Dusseldorf took a 2-goal lead. If you remember earlier on in the podcast, I'd have probably said that they were winning, which they were. They were winning 1-0 when I was recording the earlier bits, thanks to Karaman, who managed to score for Fortuna Dusseldorf. Kenan Karaman. Tommy scored after 61 minutes. But as the game went on, Köln's pressure started to build, and the possession play from Marcus Gidsol's side came into play, and Anthony Modeste scored after 88 minutes, and then Jon Mark, who missed a penalty. He didn't get a goal this time. He missed a penalty. So it was an incredibly interesting game over with Köln and Dusseldorf, and it was interesting to see that Dusseldorf just couldn't hang on. So that gives Mainz, Frankfurt, Union Berlin and Augsburg a bit of a free ticket to start moving away from those relegation positions. And so it's going to be interesting to see if they can move away and moving on to the midweek game. But we've already spoken about the big game in midweek, so we'll just go through a few of the fixtures. We won't go through all. We'll go through a few of the fixtures which are going to contribute massively in terms of positioning. So we've spoken about Borussia Dortmund with Tushar and how he thinks that game will go, and he thinks that if Borussia Dortmund really play their game, then they will get a good result against Bayern Munich, as you've already heard. But we will move on now to talk about Werder Bremen, Mönchengladbach, where Mönchengladbach haven't lost to Werder Bremen in their last 5 meetings, and Borussia Mönchengladbach has scored in their last 4 away matches, while Werder Bremen has scored 4 goals in their last 3 matches, while Borussia Mönchengladbach have scored 6, and they haven't drawn in the last 5 matches either with Borussia Mönchengladbach. But they're fighting for a Champions League place after a crushing loss against Bayer Leverkusen. But Werder Bremen need 3 points. They've been desperate for 3 points. I mean, they managed to get a 3 point against Freiburg a couple of days ago. Yesterday, I mean, but they need another 3 points to get themselves away from trouble. And we'll now move on to talk about a game on Wednesday night between Augsburg and Paderborn, one that's incredibly crucial in terms of relegation. And Augsburg are only 6 points ahead of Augsburg, with Werder Bremen 9 points away from Augsburg, but they are 3 points away from Dusseldorf. So it's going to be a crucial game there again for Paderborn. If they can go and get themselves out of trouble and off the bottom of the table, they'll need to do that. They'll need to win if they want any chance of survival. I mean, all hope is starting to fade away for Paderborn, and they'll need to win this to have any chance of staying up. Another game in crucial terms is with Union Berlin and Mainz, with huge game in terms of relegation. Again, there's a lot of teams chasing around that pack, with Augsburg, Union Berlin, Frankfurt, Mainz, Dusseldorf, Werder Bremen and Paderborn all considered to be in the mix for relegation. But Union Berlin, they're going to have a lot to work for in this game after that crushing Berlin derby loss at the Olympiastadion. But Mainz, they're 3 points above Dusseldorf. You know, if Dusseldorf go out and get themselves a win in that game against Schalke that they've got, you know, maybe it will maybe that they get the relegation scrap could turn on its head, and Mainz will end up dropping into that relegation qualification place. So it's a must-win game for both sides. Union Berlin looking to propel themselves away from the relegation positions, and they'll need to do so if they want to stay up. And that's all of the games really to talk about so far. But that's about all that we've got time for. We'll be back on Friday for the proper episode of the L15 Weekly Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, smash the like button, subscribe if you're new. Make sure you turn your notifications on, so if you press the bell button next to the subscribe button, you'll get notified whenever we decide to do a podcast. So obviously every Friday, and then if there's an extra episode in the midweek, you won't be missing it because you'll have that going straight through to whatever device you are on. But in the next episode, we'll be talking about all the games that we previewed in this, and then we'll also be looking forward to some big games next weekend in the Bundesliga. So thank you very much for listening, and I'll see you next time on L15 Weekly. Thank you for watching L15 Weekly Extra. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.